let's talk targeting computers, and specifically, not just their passive bonus, but whether or not you should take targeted shots. A targeting computer is not just a computer, it's actually mostly a bunch of motors and sensors that do micro-pointing of your weapons, which have to be direct fire weapons, at the enemy mech in such a way that you can target specific locations at any time, on any turn, except for the head. Normally you have to have a mech disabled and the pilot unconscious, but if you have a targeting computer, you can take an aimed shot at any time. Certain mechs come with targeting computers. For example, the Warhawk, every variant of the Warhawk has a targeting computer. When I made my Warhawk video, I implemented the targeting computer just as its passive bonus. And one of the viewers commented that the Warhawk's main claim to fame was when it takes aimed shots and it can core out the center torso of large mechs, even like the smaller assault mechs. So what exactly does a targeting computer do? Well, it has two main effects. The first is it always gives you a -1 to hit for all your direct fire weapons. And the second is it allows you to take aimed shots at any time, except you can't do aimed shots at the head with the targeting computer. And also, if you use ultra autocannons and rotary autocannons and LBXs, you have to fire them in slugs and one-shot only modes. Note LBXs, ultras, and rotaries can still get the -1 bonus at all times, even when they're firing multiple shots, but they can't be used in aimed shot mode, in multi-shot mode. This is probably mostly just to prevent those weapons from becoming too abusive, because otherwise imagine getting like an LBX-10 and getting like 8 pellets hitting all into the same location and you get 8 crit rolls at once or something like that. So I think it was mostly just to prevent the targeting computer from being too abusive and powerful. Now in order to do an aimed shot, you do take a +3 to hit penalty, but you still get your -1 to hit passive bonus. So it's still sometimes worth it, but usually you have to be pretty close. In fact, you can wonder, is it ever actually worth it to take an aimed shot versus just getting the passive bonus from the targeting computer? You have to be careful not to fall into survivorship bias, so we're going to analyze this. Survivorship bias in this case means you'll remember the glorious aimed shot that you took out that center torso of that big mech in one game, but you forget all the times where you missed because you took an aimed shot at the +3 penalty and just didn't do any damage at all. So let's look at the distribution of 2d6 rolls. It is not a Gaussian, it's more like a triangle distribution, as you see here. Just sum up those numbers for the probabilities percentage-wise. You get some columns based on what number you have to beat. It's like 100% of the time you'll always beat a 2, for example. But only 72% you'll beat a 6, and only 2% of the time you will beat a 12 or get a 12. So let's say your probability of you only needed a 2 to hit on your 2d6 roll. If you take an aimed shot, you drop from a 100% chance to hit to only an 83% chance to hit. Now, personally, I think 83% is pretty good, so obviously if your pre-choice for taking an aimed shot was 2 to hit, it would be worth it to take an aimed shot. There must be a threshold at which it becomes not worth it. So for example, if you only needed a 3 to hit, if you go to a 6, you drop from 97 to 72%. If you needed a 4 to hit, you'd go from 91% to 58%, which is a significant chunk down, but still, it's pretty good. Now, if you need a 5 to hit, you have your chances of hitting. You go from 83% to 41%, and you're starting to take some significant harm from the aimed shot. If you need a 6 to hit, you're going from 72 to 27% chance to hit. That's a huge drop and a big risk. From a 7, you go to a 10 and you go from 58% to 16% chance of success. That's a kind of dicey proposition. And if you've got an 8 to hit, you go up to an 11. So you go from a 42% to an 8% chance of hitting. That's kind of sketchy. And if you were at a 9, you now go up to a 12, which is a factor of 10 decrease from 27% to 2.7%. If you didn't get any benefit from the aim in the aimed shot, then of course nothing would make sense. But you actually do get the benefit of hitting a location that has no armor remaining, or getting an armor penetrating hit because the armor is weak. So a 6, for example, is actually pretty good. Now let's say you have 4 weapons linked to the targeting computer. Each one is nearly independent, so for small probabilities, it almost just multiplies linearly. So 4 times 8.3% is 32-ish percent. So if you had 4 weapons that use the targeting computer, you have a 32% chance, roughly, that at least one of them will hit. Now, if that compartment happens to be a caseless torso with an ammo bin in it, then this is basically and with nothing else, then it's basically a 32% chance of an instant win. This is a pretty good deal. But let's say you had 4 weapons and you had to get a 12 to hit. That's 2.7 times 4. That's only around 10% chance of success that any one of your weapons would hit. That's not as great an odd. And consider if you had just fired them with only the passive bonus and needed a 9 to hit. There's a 27% chance that any one of your weapons will hit, 10 times better. That means that with 4 shots, you're very likely to have hits. And perhaps one of those hits will randomly hit that location anyway. So rather than taking your very low chance of hitting a aimed shot, it might be better just to shoot and take the chance that you might hit that compartment anyway without an aimed shot. As you can see, the strategy behind this is fairly complicated, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm still working on it. However, I believe currently that if your to-hit roll is 6 or lower, which is pretty hard to achieve, because let's say you've got a 4 or 5 pilot, that means you pretty much have to be in short range and neither of you really did much movement. Or if the opponent has been disabled because their pilot is unconscious or something, in that case, it's always worth it to take an aimed shot. And my current thinking is if your pre-choice to take an aimed shot to hit roll is 7 or lower, then I think maybe 50% of the time it's worth it to take an aimed shot. But I'm not sure about this yet. And as far as what to aim for, the default would just be the center torso, because that's how you kill a mech. Or if there happens to be some weak armor, then obviously target that location or exposed location. Also, early on in a fight, you don't take aimed shots because your goal is just to do lots and lots of damage. And later on, you want to do more aimed shots because you're trying to capitalize on holes in armor. So let's find the mechs that actually have targeting computers. The first one I know of is the Phoenix Hawk 6D. This particular variant has the first targeting computer that I know of. There's also 2 Centurion variants that I know of that are stock. There's the CN9DA variant, and then there's also the CN9D5 variant. Both of these have targeting computers. The only Wolverine that I know of is the 8D. Obviously, there might be variants that I don't know of, but this is the only one I can see. The Rifleman you'd think would be the perfect mech for targeting computers, and there is, in fact, the 9T, but I don't see many other variants that have targeting computers, and that puzzles me. There's also the Thunderbolt NAIS variant. The Thunderbolt isn't necessarily the very first thing I can think of, but this one's got a rotary autocannon. The Stalker 7D makes a lot of sense because it's got ER-PPCs, 2 of them, and so that makes a really nice smackaroni with the targeting computer. The Firemoth D has a targeting computer, but I forgot to mention it in my original Firemoth analysis. Also, I didn't include the aimed shots at the time. Every single adder that I know of has a targeting computer. Maybe it's just because it tends to have like PPCs and stuff. Those are kind of cry out for a targeting computer. Then there's the Hellbringer, well, aka Loki to Interspherians. There is a variant that has, I think it's actually the Prime variant, has the targeting computer on it, but the other variants don't. One of the Summoners, aka Thor to Interspherians, I think it's the Summoner D. This one has a targeting computer, and it has a nice set of ER lasers. Then there's, of course, the Warhawks. Every Warhawk variant that's a standard variant has a targeting computer. And again, that may be what makes it fearsome. So we know that there are designs that are accepted, and some of them are successful, that have targeting computers like the Adder. But what about making a custom variant? What kind of a mech would you pick for a targeting computer? Some mechs are not great, like longbows, unless they are modified to be direct fire variants. The Atlas has too much of a mixture of weapons, again, unless you go really far out of the standard design. Battlemaster is a little better because it's got medium lasers and PPC, so it's a little better for customization. Now the Marauder, at least in its classic form of direct fire weapons, is a perfect mech that would be suitable for a targeting computer. But perhaps by stripping out the SRM and its ammo, you could stick in a small targeting computer into a warrior, and that AC-2 suddenly, which is really an endgame weapon anyway, becomes much more effective. Same thing goes with Karnovs, like the Karnov gunship. Maybe you could have a bunch of machine guns that all just come in linked to a targeting computer to get those endgame crit hits on an exposed armor hole. Possibly something like a Demolisher with super powerful AC-20s linked to a targeting computer might be pretty cool. The Partisan also, because it's got like 4 AC-5s or AC-2s or something like that, might be really good for that purpose. It just seems like it's crying out for it. It puzzles me why I can't see a Nova with a targeting computer as a standard variant. Oh, something as small as a Wasp might just be a little bit too lightweight, because that loss of a ton for the minimum size targeting computer is just devastating. And the same goes for the Locust, though possibly the future tech versions and stripping out machine guns might make them viable, either the Wasp or the Locust. Perhaps some variant of the Awesome, although those PPCs are pretty big, so the targeting computer would also have to be pretty big. Perhaps some sort of a Warhammer. It seems to have some pretty ideal weapons for it, except of course the SRMs. And maybe some variant of the Shadowhawk. Could you imagine something that jumps and has pulse lasers and just kind of pops away shots, canceling out its jumping penalty with the pulse laser bonus plus the targeting computer passive, though targeting computers cannot be used to do aimed shots with pulse lasers. But perhaps the ultimate of all would be to get rid of the missile pack on a Jenner and link the medium lasers to a targeting computer, then you can cancel out the part of the jump with the targeting computer, or possibly even put pulse lasers on it and have like a jumping Jenner that can shoot at you, but you can't hit it because it's so fast and it jumps.